Aloha and welcome to Farm Life Nation, a place for conversations about the problems we face and the solutions that exist today. Well, aloha everybody and welcome to Farm Life Nation. It's Raven Aon tuning in with you from Kauai, and I have a very, very special guest in the house today, the Perma Ninja himself, Mr. Rob Cruize, tuning in from the garden, of course. So welcome, Rob. We're happy to have you here with us today.
Happy to be here with you guys. Happy to share, and happy to see you taking on this adventure. You know, there's so much to be shared in the world of ecology, and I'm happy to see more people biting into it, and that's going to have a lot more ripples. So yay for you for taking on this adventure, and thank you for having me.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. You and I have known each other for quite some time now, and I'm really excited to have you here for our audience and sharing about who you are and what got you into farming, into nature, into working with plants, because I don't know your origin stories. I just always seem to find you in the food forest every time I show up there. So tell us a little bit about what brought you into playing with plants.
I think I'm pretty lucky in the sense that my family had a lot of female gardeners. So my family's from the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico, and my mom, my aunts, both my grandmas were all gardeners. So I was kind of lucky to be able to follow them and see their stoke on just plants and nature in general, and then also to see their appreciation of fruit trees and just the wanderlust of nature. My mom's a florist. So I grew up in a flower shop. So I was always around plants, and I learned a lot of my flowers and plants from actually like indoor warehouses, as crazy as it is. I also learned a lot about how to make things beautiful from her and how to like kind of guess touch, you know? So I would say that's kind of where I started, and I always was very fascinated by plants and trees, and I really didn't understand that was different, I guess, until I was an adult. And then I would say, you know, I was really into board sports, you know, in my after I got out of high school in my early 20s and stuff, and I spent a lot of time just surfing and skating, as a lot of people do. And I kind of got to point where I was putting my energy into that as trying to make a living out of that, and I got really just disenchanted with just the system itself, and as far as just making money and putting my energy into, I guess you would say, like the business side of life, and like building up like a corporation, building up a business for to make money. And I kind of around that time the Occupy Wall Street movement was starting, and I kind of saw that as like the first time people were saying, look at this whole big machine that we're with is not a great idea. And I was able to kind of spend some time in Occupy LA with a lot of different kinds of people that I wouldn't have really met otherwise, and that kind of showed me that there was a stirring underneath the belly of our culture of really wanting something different. And I would say at that time I was a photographer. I was also doing wedding photography and all kinds of other photography that would actually bring in decent revenue. But it kind of got me bitter, because people, a lot of the times, they only want to pay for pictures of themselves. And that really wasn't getting me excited after a little bit of time. So I ended up coming here to Kauai, and I learned about permaculture, and I learned about a lot of things that were happening here. But at the time I was living in LA. So I went back to LA, and I spent like a solid year just studying absolutely everything I could find on the internet and all through, you know, the libraries, and pulled everything I could and just absorbed as much as I could that was freely available. I went back to Florida from there because I knew LA was a little bit too much concrete after traveling a little bit more. So I went back to Florida, and I actually worked with a butterfly farm for a year, and I got to apply a lot of the permaculture that I was learning. And I helped him take apart his whole butterfly farm and put it back together in just a little bit more of ecological mind frame. And yeah, he went from spraying poisons for 20 years to completely not spraying poisons after a year working with him. So I
Wow.
would say, yeah, that was probably one of my biggest accomplishments, like right off the top. And I kind of helped him just move his mentality away from, just, I guess you would say, chemical based solutions.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I'm pretty proud to say right now he has a thriving food forest, and he has a whole butterfly, animal, like bug theme park at this point. And that all kind of stemmed from us redoing his whole farm. And then from there, I heard about the Kauai Food Forest starting here on Kauai. And that was one of the big reasons I moved over here, was to be a part of that project from the ground, because I knew there was no other way that I was going to be able to learn how to do that.
Mhm.
I basically consumed all I could consume from the internet, and I knew that I'm not going to know these plants. I'm not going to know them until I'm able to learn them from seed to seed. And then so I was able to hook up with the food forest and join the crew early on, and it's been just a remarkable experience. I've been able to I feel like grow so much faster, because if you're around gardeners, you're learning from each other.
Mhm.
And a lot of times gardeners are in isolation because of just the way the culture is right now. So to have a group of gardeners like working together on one small piece of land for the last 10 years, we've done something a lot different. We've created a little microculture into ourselves. And yeah, I feel like, that garden is a part of me and I am a part of it.
Mhm.
And now I've been able to, I've lived on a few different farms and homesteads over the time I've been here. And now I'm on Aloha Honeybee Farm in Kilauea by Secret Beach. And I've been here for about 3 years. And yeah, the garden I'm sitting in here was just all guinea grass when I moved here. And now it's gigantic. It's kind of silly. But that's kind of what got me started. And the more that I'm on the path, the more that I'm kind of on a path of, I feel, of shedding like cultural conditioning and shedding just what is our normal. And I'm always kind of trying to lean away from what is, I guess, what is the norm, and trying to lean back into what is human, and trying to
Mhm.
lean into what our ancestors would have been doing with their time and their life force. So I feel, honestly, I spend most of my time in the garden, and I feel that's where I have the most peace and I have the most uh, power.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like recreating Eden. And
Mm,
I don't think the majority of people that may listen to this may ever know what that feels like,
mm,
to start with a raw plot of guinea grass
mm,
and to be barefoot there and to be working with the systems versus trying to control them. And I think that you've really found a beautiful way to create balance in a very chaotic world. And
mm.
I'm so blown away. The last time I saw you was coming up to get some pigeon pea seed at the food forest. And I was so blown away at what has happened just from the last time I was there, which was only a couple of years ago. So let's talk a little bit about the food forest. Like, when you guys started, you were just given a blank slate, right? Like, you guys started with how much land?
It was about 2 acres is what we started with. Yeah. And the food forest was, well, for the food forest, there was a community garden that was hosted by Malama Kauai. And the food forest was we kind of started out as like one big garden plot. On the side of that was Paul Massey's. And then from there, we were given the opportunity to take the 2 acres surrounding the community garden and turn it into a food forest. It had a little bit more slope, so it wasn't perfect for gardening, but great for trees.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, the food forest was actually a project of a permaculture course. So during that permaculture course, the food forest was designed, and it
Okay.
was implemented a few years later. And so yeah, the whole thing was very thought out, and I'm really lucky too, because I didn't design that food forest. It was designed by people that had a lot more know know-how than I did at that time. Ray Maki and Paul Massey, and a few other people that had been doing it for a while. So when that whole thing was started, what we did was the whole thing was tilled. It was amended. Berms and basins were put in, so the whole thing has water catchment. And then we laid down drip tape, which we barely use, but we laid down drip tape, and then the whole thing was covered in cardboard. So we laid like a solid 2 acres of cardboard, which was,
wow.
It looked like a complete mess. But it held down the grasses for us for almost a year. It was probably about 8-9 months before we started having everything decompose and the grasses and everything come back in. But from there, what we did, we popped in a lot of our support species, and then we planted our fruit trees about 30 feet apart. And it's amazing, like looking back and seeing how much plants went in there and seeing how much diversity went in there. And then now looking back 10 years later going, wow, I wish we would have planted more diversity, and I wish we would have planted more plants, because that's what it's kind of always comes down to. It's about always making sure that the ground is thoroughly covered and there's enough diversity. So whenever we have huge spikes of heat like this, that somebody's going to survive and somebody's going to keep the life cycles going. But it was an amazing thing. We had about 100 people come in for the first weekend and help us put a lot of plants in, and then it went back down to about 15 stewards. And in the beginning we had 15 like really brilliant people trying to make this thing happen, and like it was so beautiful and gung-ho. And then over the time, it kind of shrunk down to a handful of people that were really taking care of it. And I feel like over the last, I would say the last 2 or 3 years, it's just been gaining so much strength and momentum by more people really becoming very dedicated to it, and showing up every week and learning the system more and more, because it really takes years to be able to understand, not only all the plants and how to work with them, but to understand what to do when and what not to do when. And so it takes a while, but it's been great. We've had a lot more interest, and it's never going to go out of style. Like, food is the bottom basic of life, and ecosystems are the bottom basics of food. So making ecosystems of food is basically what humans are put here to do. And I mean, that's a very, very big statement, but at this point we've been taking them apart. So to start putting them back together is a lot better of a use of our energy. So yeah, it's been an amazing ride, and I really wish that we could see more of these food forest projects happen in other countries, because not other countries, other counties. I would really like to see one in every county, because every county is going to have a different, microclimate, and they're also going to have different ethnicities, and every ethnicity is going to have a different heritage of plants and and they're going to have a different way to be able to share them. So to really hold the genetic diversity that is some of the most important, things there is, it's going to take a lot more food forests and a lot more seed banks and a lot more stewards. And I think that's really what I want to push. I really want to push people to start looking at themselves as stewards of the land, and I always want to, we need more gardeners. That's what I want to see, before we even get to farmers. I want gardeners, because I mean, it's an easier place for people to enter. And, when you're also gardening on a smaller level, it gives you the ability to be able to make those ecosystems and steward them in a human level. To be able to do on a farm level, you have to be damn well, and you have to have the system pretty well set. And that's not done very often quite yet. So, yeah, I'm calling for more stewards, and we need more food forests for those people to learn how to do that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think anybody who's looking to start to gain a green thumb, there's going to be a million excuses as to why you can't, but we want to kind of show everybody why you can. And everybody always asks me, well, what do I do if I don't have land? Well, I always say, well, you can grow sprouts in your kitchen.
Mhm.
Like you can do
Right.
something, right? You can have some kind of a connection to the cycle of life and your connection to your food. But there's this huge disconnect between, there's people that have land that may want to have a food forest, but they don't know where to start. And there's
Mhm.
people who don't have land that may want to become a steward, but they don't know where to begin. And I
Mhm.
would love for you to share your perspective on how we can support people to kind of move in that direction and really find, their niche, right? Like
Mhm.
some people are really great arborists and some people are really strong and capable of like turning the soil and, hauling, everything
Yeah.
around. So it's kind of like finding your strength
Mhm.
versus focusing on your limitations. So I would love to hear your perspective on what advice would you give somebody who is just looking to get started into permaculture?
Yeah. I would say find people in your area that are really knocking it out. Find the gardeners, the farmers that have the systems, and befriend them. And I don't mean out in the virtual world. I mean, you got to really be in their gardens with them, and try to be useful and try to be of value, because then you will be invited in. And you really have to have it with experience. Like learn as much as you can from the books, but you have to have the experience. So I would say it's really coming down to relations. You have to build the relations with the people that have what you need, and you have to have what they need to be of value. So yeah, I would say just you got to really find those people, and try your best to get into it. um any kind of piece of land, from family or friends, or if you have to, whatever you have means to be able to access, you just have to try and have to start, because really it comes down to just observation, and like trying something and seeing how it goes. So you have to have as many, what we call like feedback loops. Everything that you interact with, you're going to get a feedback loop with that. you know so you have to start having your feedback loops, and you have to start having different plates spinning. So don't wait on anything. You could get pots for nothing if you look around, and there's always dirt around. You could probably find great soil underneath big old trees if you look around. There's so just pull together your resources and just start. And I mean, also the internet is an amazing place to be able to network with people. Find Facebook groups of gardeners in your area, and even on Craigslist. Just find the right people and make those people your people. So then you could be like them, is the best way I can put it. And then like kind of like I was saying, if we had more food forests in every county, I would say, well, just find your county's food forest and go over
Right.
there and start learning what they did and learn from their people. And that's a starting point. But it's not an easy thing right now. We've had a lot of we don't have a lot of gardeners. We don't have a lot of farmers. So I feel like it's even more important now to find those people and support them, and to, team up. So team up best as you can, team up. Just don't let anything stop you. You got to just experiment.
Yeah, the resources are all there. I mean, that's really what I want to propose on this podcast is that sure, there's going to be a million problems, but we have all the solutions.
Mm-hmm.
And looking back, and I've had this conversation with several of our other guests, looking back on when we started, like we had to go to a library and like a Dewey Decimal System.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I remember the first time I heard about glyphosate and I had to go to a library to try to figure out what it was because we didn't have Google. So for anybody who's looking to get into permaculture farming or start a food forest or become a steward, Google is your best friend. YouTube University, everything
Right.
is there. There are so many incredible people all over the planet. Pick a country,
Right.
pick
Yep.
a country and type in permaculture and see
Right.
what comes up and reach out to those people, because human effort is, I think, one of the hardest things to come by. It seems like land resources are almost easier to provide than to have really solid, honorable, integral, hardworking, kind, loving, good people that want to show up and want to put their effort into somebody else's land. That
Yeah.
seems to be kind of where I have seen the most issues, just because of just human drama, just what we deal with. And it's that escape velocity that I think promotes a lot of people to leave the concrete jungle to try to get barefoot and be out on the land and be in the garden. And that has really propelled people like myself and you and all the other guests we've had so far. Most of us were raised in the city. Not all of us were raised on a farm. But I definitely see the florist training of you in the systems that you've built. Now that I look back on it, I'm like, oh, I really love, no wonder all those different shades of greens and variegates worked the way they did, because Rob used to work in a florist shop. So that makes perfect sense. But yeah, I think that we have all the solutions, and we just need more of a volunteer army, where there just needs to be more people willing to show up and do the thing to be able to perpetuate this. And I want to encourage landowners who are out there that don't know what to do with land to seek out people like Rob, because you find someone like this guy, and if you have the honor or the privilege to be able to have him putting together a food forest on your land, that's huge, because from then on, anybody can be trained and it can be maintained, but it's the beginning design process that really does require some education. It requires that hands-on dedication, which is why you mentioned Ray Mackey, you mentioned Paul Massey. Hopefully we'll have both of them on this show as well. You mentioned those guys, and they have so much extensive experience. Like they could probably look at a blank piece of land and just design a map in their heads and then translate it into some kind of cool Google Doc or something. And then you're done. It's like, oh, there it is. But to just go from scratch without the education is very challenging. So I love that you mentioned finding your team and really digging in and, like, you know, find your people and start to see how you can integrate what you have into what may already exist, or come together with a group of people to create something that doesn't exist, like that food forest that's up there. And I mean, you look at the capabilities of people with extensive resources to offer something like that to the community, right? It was like, I mean, how much is that land worth? And they were able to be like, oh, here, have a community garden.
Yeah, right.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful thing that someone with that much land can do for the people who are looking to get out there in nature. So I really appreciate your perspective on all of that. And I'd love for you to share with everybody, what do you see coming for the future? Like, what's your vision over the next 3 to 5 years with permaculture farming?
You know, I guess, well, let's put it this way. For myself, I'm starting to really see how hungry the land is here in Hawaii. We have just finished, you know, sugar cane, a massive amount of sugarcane farming, and then massive amount of pineapple farming, and then a lot of the land here was left, you know, Ontario beat up. You know, it's green because we have water and sun, but the soil's beat up. And I'm really seeing it takes a lot to make it happy again. And I think one of the things that we are missing right now is a lot of animal integration. And animals have a really bad rap right now with our agricultural systems, because they're used in a horrible way. And a lot of the times they're as bad for the animals as it is for the land as it is for the humans. So I really see more rotational grazing with big animals like cows as a really important part of permaculture and agroforestry in general. What I would like to do in my next chapter is to do rotational grazing with cows and then building food forests behind them. Because there's two things that rule our island, one of them being the albizia trees and the other one being the guinea grass, right?
My nemesis.
But guinea grass is really holding this whole island together. If we didn't have that guinea grass, we would be losing so much more topsoil every rain event. And realistically, the cows utilize the guinea grass to some of its highest potential. So
Yep.
if we can take acres of guinea grass and concentrate it into a tiny little bit of space with cows and use those embryos to start like syntropic farming agroforestry systems where it's just a little bit more maintenance and a little bit more biology cycled through the whole system. I really feel that is what kind of gets me excited because I'll tell you what, right now, as far as like my human path, I've been doing a lot more trapping and I've been doing a lot of trapping of pigs here. And I'll tell you, I get a lot more calories from pigs than I do from my garden when you equal out the effort. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So, yeah, so like animals, I feel are a crucial part of it and underutilized, and they require a lot of maintenance and work. But the fertility aspect is bar none. You know, it doesn't make sense for us to work hard to build fertility when the animals could work soft and build fertility. So
I am
that's
so
one
glad you
place I would like
mentioned
to go
that.
with it. Yeah, and I
I'm
mean,
so glad you mentioned that because I was going to ask you, I was like, the one thing I don't see Rob doing is integrating animals. And I'm glad that you mentioned that because I have definitely been working with that process more so too. And there's some incredible people doing some incredible things with their rotation of cover cropping, bringing the cows through the cover crops, bringing the chickens through to deal with all of the larvae and scratching all of the manure, and then bringing up the topsoil, and then integrations of animals and plant species. And we're doing that right now. We're doing that with goats and chickens through our orchards that we just planted. And it's so fun to watch. It's just like the observation process of how it naturally, it feels so right, versus when we're just working with plant species and losing that little bit of an element, because I think we are meant to work with biodiversity, including animal species. And I'm sure you, like many of us, have done the whole vegan thing. We've been raw, we've done it all. And if we can integrate animals into the system in a way that feels humane, not that necessarily killing something is humane, but if it's a part of the cycle of life, then it can work. And so I'm glad to hear that you've been trapping these, wild species who are really doing detrimental damage. I mean, if we just let the pigs go wild here on Kauai, we would have a major issue. So it's actually part of the ecology to harvest them. So I'm glad to hear that you're able to do that. But I couldn't agree more that, figuring out how to have these rotations with your animals is really huge, because they're going to do 100 times more work for us with, 10% of the effort, versus if we're just trying to do it all ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Right now I have ducks, actually. I have Indian runner ducks that I've had for about 5 months. I haven't really shown anything of theirs yet, but it's been fun. I've been able to run them through our orchards out here, and I've learned so much from them in this little bit of time that I've had them. And I'm also raising a few chickens right now just for really composting. And so, I mean, you know how it is here. Everybody gets chickens if you like it or not. So you gotta try to utilize them to the best of their abilities. But realistically, I feel the animals in agroforestry is really it. And this is what the ecosystems are made from. That they're made from the animals. So whenever they're not there, it slowly gets worse. So it's really important to have them in there. And Alan Savory and his holistic grazing systems has really inspired me. And Ernst Grolsch and his syntropic farming systems. I feel like if those two can be combined really well, that would be the agriculture of the future, in my opinion.
Amazing. Yes. And I want to talk more about that. So we obviously are going to have you back, because a half an hour goes by so fast on this show. And I am super thrilled about all the work that you're doing. And I'd love to check out your ducks. I'm super
please,
yeah. Like, send me some videos. Let me see what you got going on. Maybe we'll get a couple of babies from you at some point.
Okay.
But I love that you mentioned that, and huge kudos to you for all the time and energy that you volunteered. Like I know that the food forest is a labor of love. It's not something that anybody's getting paid to just hang out in the garden. It's definitely something that you've really put a lot of time and energy and love into it, and it shows.
Thank you.
And I'm looking forward to maybe on our next episode, let's go remote. Like, let's actually get in the field and go remote for our next one, so that you can actually show our audience some of these systems and how they integrate. And yes, they're not going to necessarily be able to be applied everywhere in the world, but anywhere that is, subtropical, you can definitely be working with a lot of the plants that Rob's been working with and see how these systems integrate. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today and joining us from the garden. And I am thrilled about everything you got going on, and congrats on the whole honeybee realm. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation in itself, but I love that all the systems are the full loop samsara is starting to come together in a beautiful way.
Oh, well, thank you for having me, Raven. And I'm stoked on your new journey, and I'll be one of your supporters now to help you push these words.
Yay, mahalo. Well, tell our audience how they can get in touch with you and how they can find the work that you've been up to.
Cool. On Instagram, my handle is Rob_Cruize. You could find me also on the YouTubes. If you just look up Rob Cruize, me and my partner Andy have put a few videos up of our gardens and some of the videos of the food forest in its progress. And we have a KauaiFoodForest.org webpage too, so you can see some of the progress of the project and what it looked like when it was in its preemie stage. And I'm usually in my garden, so most people can't find me anyways, but on the internet, that's where you'll find me.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Rob. Have a beautiful day, and I look forward to seeing what you come up with next, and we will have you back on, and we'll go remote next time.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to sharing with you guys more.
Awesome. All right, everybody.
Awesome.
Thanks so much for tuning in, and we will be back with episode number 5 next week. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day, and we will see y'all soon. Aloha.
Thanks. Bye.
If you too would like to be on the show or would like to become a sponsor of Farm Life Nation, please reach out to us. We'd love to hear what you're growing up to.